Well, for the past few days, Canada's finance minister has been in Europe, meeting with other finance leaders looking for a way to reboot the global economy. Today, as a part of that European tour, Jim Flaherty made a brief stop in Vimy, France, and that is where he joins me from now. Minister, thanks for joining us.
Not at all.
Can you tell me what you're doing in Europe?
I am visiting Vimy Ridge and announcing that we're going to begin the funding of a new visitor center here at the Canadian National Vimy Memorial so that we can have it ready for the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge, which is in 2017.
Now, you just met with the G7 a couple of days ago. You're in Europe. Are you meeting with colleagues? And if so, what are they saying about the financial crisis that Europe is in?
I've met with some regional and local people here, but my colleagues in the G7 are mainly European. So we spent the weekend, most of the weekend together, and we had very frank discussions, actually. We followed the tradition which Canada reestablished at our meeting at Iqaluit a couple of years ago, so that it was informal. There was no communique. People spoke their minds clearly and directly. There was some disagreement, but we worked on that, and by the end of the weekend, we were much closer together.
What is the disagreement about?
It's really a disagreement in emphasis. Some of the European countries are very keen on incentives and stimulating their economies. They are legitimately concerned, some of them, with rising unemployment, particularly youth unemployment in some of the European countries. On the other hand, some of us, including Canada, are concerned that we make sure that we have our fiscal houses in order, that we make sure we don't abandon the goals of the Toronto summit, which were confirmed at Los Cabos. That is, that we all work toward balanced budgets, fiscal consolidation, reducing our debt to GDP ratios so that we're in a solid fiscal position. I mean, that to me is the number one rule. So in some situations one can do both. We're trying to do that in Canada now. We're incenting infrastructure growth, for example, at the same time moving to balanced budgets in the medium term.
There has been some discussion in Britain about the possibility of leaving the EU. Do you think it's still a sustainable institution, or has this crisis illustrated that there are just too many difficulties for it to keep going?
Well, I think actually that the G7, first of all, is a very important institution, that we get together and talk to each other on an informal basis, because we are the largest industrial economies in the Western world. And what we work on together matters. The EU is complex. I mean, they need some structural reform. The EU, all of the ministers I talk to about it agree. I mean, they've got a situation right now where they need everyone to be unanimous on particular issues in order to move forward. And that's a very difficult thing to do, particularly when it comes to issues like a unified banking regulator, which is absolutely essential for Europe. And they're struggling to get there, but everyone has a voice and everyone has a vote.
Minister, we've been talking a lot lately about the free trade deal you're trying to negotiate with Europe. Some people say it's as much as 5 months behind. What is the holdup, and are we getting any closer to signing it?
Well, I'm not the trade minister, but I do know that there's been significant progress in the discussions over these many months. Trade arrangements are very difficult to negotiate, including free trade agreements. We certainly saw that 10 or 12 years ago with NAFTA, but it was accomplished, and it has been of great benefit to the people of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. So it's worth patience, and it's worth diligence, and it's worth the goal at the end of the day.
Is there a domestic angle here? And in particular, in terms of agriculture, is that problematic?
There's always a domestic angle, no matter what the particular subject matter is, whether it's agriculture or automobiles or military procurement. There's always a domestic angle.
Minister, finally, if you could give us a bit of an overview of how you think the Canadian economy is doing and the European economy as well, now that you're there and having a look with your feet on the ground.
Well, things are better than they were last year. But we're not out of the woods yet, and I said that to my colleagues on the weekend. I think we have to be very careful. Some of the European countries are in recession. Europe overall is in recession. Japan is struggling to develop positive economic growth. The United States recovery is tentative and is clear in housing, but in other areas of the economy is not entirely clear. Our growth is quite modest. So I think we have to make sure that we are diligent, that we continue to be fiscally responsible, that we watch our banking systems, we watch our financial systems carefully so that we avoid what we went through in 2007, 2008.
Thank you very much for your time today, Minister Jim Flaherty.
Thank you. Pleasure. Bye.